of a sudden.
All right. Welcome to the Writing Well office hours.
Did you see how serious I just went when you went from off air to live in the top right hand corner there? I was like laughing and jovial, and then all of a sudden I was like, yeah, hello.
Don't worry about it. It's office hours. Very
Mm,
casual.
I like it.
So let people know a little bit about your background so that they have some context for the questions you're going to ask.
Okay, a little bit about my background. I'm 40 years of age, although I look about 16. I left school when I was 16, no education whatsoever. And I started working in the rail industry, and I worked in the rail industry for the next 19 years. I had 19 different jobs during that time, and got to quite a senior position. And then when I was about 35, something like that, my first marriage, I've been married twice. My first marriage was falling apart, and I blamed alcohol for that at the time. So I decided to quit drinking alcohol to try to save my marriage, which ultimately failed miserably because I got divorced. But it awakened something within me. I was like, well, hang on a minute. Like, I live in a town of 3,000 people, and I am the only person I know who has quit alcohol, right? Yeah, there are people who don't drink, but I'm the only one who's quit. That's quite powerful. And also, I learned how to quit by reading a book. So I just started reading more books, seeing how far this could go. And I think it was Jack Canfield, The Success Principles. And I was reading that one day, and he said, you can do anything you want in life. So I was like, oh, right. Well, I don't really want to work on the railway. I just did it because society told me I needed to. I quit that job on the railway and decided that I was going to help people quit alcohol. That was my goal. But to get from railway to alcohol and still support a family at that time, I decided that I was going to be a professional poker player because I was loving poker at the time. And I thought, by being a professional poker player, A, I will have tons of money to be able to support my family, and B, I will have freedom. I can play when I want to play, and I can work on my new business when I want to work on my new business. And I created this mind map, and as part of this mind map on how to earn money through poker, because I didn't just want to solely earn money through playing, I wrote, wouldn't it be a great story for a poker magazine to sell the story of how I packed in this high profile job with all this wonderful security to be a poker player. So I followed Jack Canfield's rule of five, and I wrote to 5 editors on that day and said, look, I'm leaving the railway to be a professional poker player. Would you like me to write a column for you? And one of them wrote back to me, Poker Pro Europe magazine. They wrote back and said, wow, that is a wonderful idea. And I was like, holy shit, what am I going to do now? I didn't know how to write. I didn't have a clue. And I wrote this article. I just made it up off the top of my head. It was called something like Managing Directors, Wardrobes, and an Argument or something. And I sent it to him thinking, I'm bombed. And he said, I love it. And at the time, I was earning like £45,000 sterling at the time on the rail industry, with bonuses up to about 65,000, I guess. And then last year, I earned 76,000 sterling as a freelance writer, primarily writing poker. So I started to become I wanted to become a poker player. I ended up being a poker writer, and in my spare time now, well, the spare time that I had when I was writing about poker, I've developed this business where I help people quit alcohol, and the theme that runs through all of that is writing. I write an obscene amount of words per day. Do you use Grammarly?
I love Grammarly. Yes.
My Grammarly reports always say, hey, Lee Davey, you have written more than 100% of Grammarly uses this week. My mistakes are not that good, but like my output is pretty mega. I mean, I've slowed down.
That's the best way to get better at writing, is to write a lot.
I'm 5,000 to 10,000 words a day.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
So that's my background.
All right. So what can I help you with?
What can you help me with? Number of things. Where should we start?
Wherever you would like.
Okay, right now at the moment, I am in the middle of I've written a book.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm cheating. I haven't written a book. In 2015, I gave myself a plan to write a diary because
Okay.
I'm a former addict of everything: alcohol, smoking, cigarettes, gambling, sex, you name it. I've been an addict of it. I guess you could say that I'm in recovery. So I was writing a diary. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You always say, I mean, I learned like write for one person,
Mm-hmm.
mine. Okay, so I very selfishly always write with me in mind. I always think, what would I like to read? You know, so
Yeah.
I pretty much think a lot of people out there like to read the nitty gritty, intimate details of people's lives. We're very voyeuristic. So I ended up getting about 50 diary entries in 2015 on Scrivener, and I'm going to put them all together in a book called The Needy Helper, which is my company. The
Mm-hmm.
Needy Helper Excerpts of 2015, A Life Without Alcohol. And I'm going to give that book away as a free gift.
Okay.
So I have that book on Scrivener right now in 50 different pages.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, there are two things. One, I'm really not sure how now to get that from Scrivener into your hands, i.e., via PDF, Kindle, and hard copy. Like, I don't know how to go from Scrivener to those 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I have a real issue bounding around when I'm writing in terms of tense. So,
Mm.
so my article, what I'm reading it back to me, sometimes I'm talking in present tense, sometimes I'm in past tense, sometimes I'm in future tense. I'm writing from different perspectives. It's a little bit all over the place, and it reads okay to me, but I keep reading all this stuff that says that people are going to hate that kind of stuff. So I guess I guess like, how do I get an editor involved in all that as well? And editors cost money. I don't have the money, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I don't think there's a problem with bouncing around in tense so long as it makes sense as you read it. And I don't know whether or not it does because I haven't read
No,
it.
no.
But sometimes yeah, when I'm writing nonfiction, sometimes I will bounce around in tense as well.
Mm.
So it's not, yeah. It's something that is a thing you can do. The reason people tell people that it's not something you should do is because usually if you're changing tense, like every sentence is a different one, then your paragraph won't make sense.
Yeah.
So that is something you'll want to find someone to at least read it and give you some feedback, even if it's not officially an editor.
Mm.
So there are lots of things that you can do. So there are lots of places you can find editors. I do editing through Abyssinian Books
Mm.
as one of the options. And then there's also, if you are very tight on budget, something you can do is you can sign up for scribophile.com. It's like a writer community. And you can sign up, it's free. When you critique other people's stories, then you earn karma points.
Right.
And you can upload chapters of your book with karma points. So like you spend the karma points to upload your chapters, and then other people can critique your chapters.
That sounds.
So that might be a good place to start. I think you can buy karma points too, and they have a paid membership as well. But they have a lot of great resources and a lot of people on there in every genre.
Mm.
Let's see. The other thing is, well, and this is more, I think you need more copy editing, line editing. So when you're looking for editors, look for copy or line editors. I don't think you need proofreading because you're already using Grammarly, and that checks what a proofreader would check.
What is a copy or line editor? What is that?
Copy editing and line editing is, okay, so there are 3 levels of editing. There's developmental editing, which is like the overall structure. Which for you, I don't think is a problem because your structure is that you have these journal entries from the year.
Yeah, each chapter's a day.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were writing a novel, then maybe you would need a developmental edit because you couldn't figure out why your character wasn't interacting with their nemesis at the end in the right way. Right? Like something didn't happen right along the way, and then so that's developmental editing. And then copy editing, which is also sometimes called line editing, is more, okay, does the first sentence of your paragraph tell me what the paragraph is going to be about, and do the next sentences follow logically from that, and is the last sentence sort of wrapping it all up so that I know what this little unit is. And that's more strict and more logical for nonfiction than for fiction. But this goes a lot into, like, I have this thing that I call a story star because who doesn't like to get a gold star, right? Yeah. So there are 5 main elements of story, and this applies to both fiction and nonfiction, although people don't usually think of it as applying to nonfiction. So you have an inciting incident, you have a complication, you have a crisis, you have a climax, and you have a resolution. And when you're writing nonfiction, if you're writing like an argumentative essay, for example, you'll have your introduction would be your, like, talking about your inciting incident. Why should people care about whatever you're talking about? And what are you going to talk about? And then your complication is sort of your own take on how you're going to approach that problem. And then your crisis is all of the things that are involved with the problem. What are all the pieces of the problem? And your climax is sort of your one line, 1 sentence summary of how you're solving the problem. And the resolution is how that applies to real life or other more general situations. So a line editor is going to go through each paragraph and figure out if it works or not. Whereas a developmental editor is going to go through the story as a whole and figure out what works and what doesn't. And they're
going to use that framework. So they're going to go through using that framework to check that you.
Well, everyone has their own framework. I use this framework because it's easy for me to visualize. With my whole star, like each point of the star is a different one of those 5 things, and like they nest. So for me, I use that, and then there's, you know, the grammar of the sentence. Does the grammar of the sentence? So a copy editor, a line editor, is sort of the transition in between the developmental edit and the proofreading. So they're looking to make sure that each sentence in the paragraph and each paragraph in the chapter makes sense. But they're also looking to make sure that the grammar supports that meaning that you're looking for. So if a sentence says one thing, but it doesn't quite make sense, then they'll make grammar change suggestions for how to make that sentence make sense in the context of the paragraph.
Right.
And then a proofreader does essentially what Grammarly does. So you can use them. I think in some ways it's better to use Grammarly because Grammarly, it's not going to accidentally forget to notice a misspelled word because it's programmed to notice every misspelled word.
Yeah, the only thing with Grammarly, I like Grammarly, keeps telling me that I keep writing passive sentences all the time. That's something I'll ask you about that in a minute, actually. But I'm just bumping around. But one thing about Grammarly, so I've got this book on Scrivener. So I've got 50 chapters on Scrivener, but I wasn't a member of Grammarly when I wrote them. So I've been putting them back through Grammarly, but Grammarly won't take all 50. So I'm going from Scrivener to Grammarly 1 chapter at a time. But then Grammarly doesn't keep your, unless I'm doing something wrong, Grammarly doesn't keep your structure. It doesn't keep your font structure and everything together. So if I put something from Scrivener into Grammarly, and then put it back into Scrivener, it's in a different, it's all moved about. Like,
the thing about Scrivener is that it doesn't matter what font it appears in to you, because when you compile, it has settings that'll make it all be whatever it's supposed to be.
right. So it's just my anal attitude of like, oh, this has to look like this all the time.
So I think you're gonna like my way of formatting better than the easy way of formatting because
Right.
you care about how everything looks.
Right.
But the easy way of formatting, if you go in Scrivener and you go to File and then you scroll down to the bottom of that drop-down menu, there's a little thing that says Compile. And if you click on that, then you can specify both a like a style and a format. So any document that you have in your Scrivener project that has if you open the inspector, when you're in the file, it should have a checkbox that says include and compile.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that's included in the compile will compile into you, and you can pick, PDF, you can pick standard manuscript format, you can pick EPUB, you can pick Mobi.
Right.
And most people that I know just do that. That's all they do.
Yeah.
To format their ebooks. And I actually don't do that.
Right.
Because I like more control. So my workflow is I write my draft in Scrivener. And I go through chapter by chapter. I copy and paste it into Grammarly, and I fix whatever needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And then I put it into an HTML file.
Right.
And I actually hard code the HTML of the ebook, because I can have that HTML file open in my web browser. So when I save in the programming editor, I can click refresh on my web browser, and it'll immediately show me the updated version. So I can see right away, okay, is my chapter title how I want it to be? Did I forget to add an extra space in between these two scenes?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make a special style for your chapter headers, because then you can use Calibre to convert once you know that your HTML file is error-free, and you can use, there's a bunch of HTML validators online you can use. Then you can use Calibre to convert it into an EPUB. And you can check that EPUB to make sure that it's a valid EPUB. And then you can convert to Mobi, and then you have all of the formats you need to upload to the major retailers.
What do you well, you mentioned there about putting it on a HTML file. Do you use a special program for that?
I use JEdit. It's free.
JEdit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the letter J and then edit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's free. It does what it should do.
Right.
It doesn't. I don't use any of the bells and whistles because I'm just making a single file. I'm not doing anything complicated.
Okay.
And then I use InDesign to make my PDFs, but I do that after I've finished with my EPUBs, my ebook files, because I can copy and paste from the rendered HTML file in my web browser into InDesign, and then I know that my typesetting is correct. Like, I know that the smart quotes are going to be curly, and I know that any special characters I have are going to show up right, and I don't have to go through and proofread the InDesign file as an extra step.
You are nuts, man.
It sounds really complicated, but once you've done it once, it's so much faster and you end up with less errors. And when you get errors, you know exactly where they are, because the HTML file validator will tell you there's an error in line 12 at column 13. And you can go right there and you know exactly what it is.
Do you know when people say like money doesn't mean everything, right? It's not all about money. Well, like what money does do for you, I guess, if you got it, is you could just write and just say, Ariane, can you do me a favor and just take care of all this stuff for me?
Yeah. Well, I do formatting. I do editing and I do formatting through Abyssinian Books. So and I'm working on putting together a course to teach people how I do this formatting, because I think it needs video instruction to streamline the learning process.
For me, I want to write, and then I want to get on to my next thing.
Yeah.
And the more I'm kind of dealing with turning what I write into a PDF or whatever, the less I'm writing, the more I'm kind of like getting done type of thing. So I think my, having listened to what you said there, I think
the thing about this is you can make yourself template files.
Right.
And as you finish each chapter, you can take 10 minutes to put it through Grammarly and put it into your template file.
Right.
So it can end up being a very small time ad if you are intentional in how you do it. Or you can just hire someone. I mean, or you can compile it yourself. I mean, I don't know a lot of the details of how to compile it and how to fix errors that might happen from compiling it. I know there are a lot of people out there who have had a lot of frustration getting their ebooks to look how they want them to, compiling straight from Scrivener or straight from Word. So that's why I do it the way I do it, because I want to make sure that my special characters are how I want them. I want to make sure that any pictures I include show up right. And once you've figured it out once, like it takes me maybe an hour or two to do an entire novel. So there's a learning curve, but it's not, I don't know. If you care about how it ends up, it I think is the best way.
I'm pretty confident that what I would like when I rub my genie is, and it takes me into the next question actually, is to find someone who I really gel with, like yourself, who kind of understand and gets kind of like what I want my final product to be like. And then I'm like, okay, here's my book, and I want you to either like help me turn it into the final product, or hire you as a coach to help me create these templates and make things simplified for me to be able to do this. So there's that angle of coaching that I wanted to talk about. We have talked about a little bit. And the other angle of coaching that I wanted to talk about and get some ideas from you is, as I explained earlier on when I was summing up my background, I am not a trained writer. You know, I was thrown out of my English class in 5th form. My teacher refused to teach me. I actually did my GCSE, my final exams in the library on my own for English. So I'm not a trained writer. And what I find in the poker industry is there are people who say, wow, Lee, we think you're a fantastic writer. We love your vulnerability. We love your stories. We love the way that you write about things that people don't write about, and you share things that people don't share. We love the authenticity and the rawness of it. And then there's another section of the poker community who are more schooled and who have gone through things, who have worked really hard to get to where they are in the industry and in their craft, who just think I'm just a bag of bones and just think that I am useless, that I'm terrible, that my writing is childish, pathetic, stupid, whatever. And I sense this, you know, I sense it's real. That guy is not a real writer. He's a joke. And then other people are like, that guy's such a great writer. And I often think to myself, how is this possible? Like,
it happens to everyone. It's a matter of taste.
How is it possible? But it's really interesting how the divide seems to be between people who are not trained to be a writer think that it's great, and people who are trained to be a writer think it sucks. So I then ask myself, do I need training here? Do I need coaching? Am I going to be a much better writer if I learn how to write properly, and how do I do that?
So I think that you probably will become a better writer if you learn how to write. But I'm hesitant about this a little bit because it sounds like you've developed your own voice very strongly. And that's something that a lot of writers struggle with because of their education.
Right.
So a lot of the problem with editing and education in writing is that it trains your uniqueness out of you.
Right.
So there are a lot of books, there's a lot of courses, there are a lot of blogs about how to write that you can find. But I think it might even be better for you to just pick someone whose writing you admire, someone that you would consider a good writer, and reach out to them and see if they would be willing to like trade critiques with you or something like that.
Stephen Pressfield doesn't know it, but he's going to be my next writing coach.
Yeah, reading his stuff is amazing. And
brilliant.
Sean Coyne as well.
Right.
The Story Grid. His stuff is amazing.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah.
I do read a lot of books on how to be a better writer, and I'm often struck by a lot of contradictory stuff. So the big one that hits me is, this is the one that really gets to me, is write as you speak, write as you are, write as you as you talk normally.
That's the part where they're trying to teach you how to own your own voice.
Right, because when you do,
so that's probably the part you don't need to listen to.
No, but when I do write that way, not only does Grammarly like start attacking me, but everybody starts attacking me. It's like, wow, hang on a minute, your punctuality is all over the place. And yet when I read, I know that when I read something, that is less important to me than the passion and the emotion. I'm not talking about paragraphs and sentences completely being destroyed. Grammarly doesn't allow that to happen. You can't get that far out of control,
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Like Grammarly will say to me, that sentence or that part of your paragraph is written in the passive tense, and I'm like, yeah, but that's how I speak. So and that's how I am.
And the thing with Grammarly is that it's really awesome because it tells you everything that's grammatically incorrect, but it's a robot. It doesn't know if you did something wrong on purpose.
Yeah.
It has no way of reading your mind. So knowing when to ignore it is a really useful skill. Which is what, if you find a good line editor, working with them will teach you a lot about your own style of writing in a conscious way. And then you'll know, okay, well, yeah, I did that wrong. Yes, Grammarly, you're correct. I did that wrong, but I'm going to ignore you and I'm going to keep it how it was because that makes it sound like me. It makes it sound authentic, and it makes it sometimes you have to be grammatically incorrect in order to be clear.
I like that. What you're saying there then is, everybody in this planet, all 7.5 billion of us, we're all different. We're all individuals. So like, rather than someone say, this is the way you write, someone says, hey, Lee Davey, this is your voice. I understand how you write, but you could be a much better writer if your style was to incorporate this or to eradicate this or to change it slightly.
It's not that your writing would be better. It's that you would have more tools to express yourself maybe more concisely, maybe more clearly, depending on what you're talking about and how you're talking about it. So that's the value of education, is having conscious awareness of what you're doing when and why that works or doesn't work in that context.
Okay.
And that's something that a copy editor, a line editor will help you with when it comes to just sentence and paragraph construction.
Right. Okay. I need a coach. The other thing is you talked earlier on about structure, and of course I've read like every book out there on writing. I understand the story structure, but when I write nonfiction, I'd love to have a structure. I don't use a structure, if I'm being honest with you. Here's my structure. The first line has to bleed. I think I learned that from James Altucher. Like the first line has to bleed, and that's pretty much about it. I kind of yeah. I don't have.
Writing nonfiction. I have two little like images for writing. One is the story star, and one is something I call the fact funnel. And they're really the same thing, but they look different. So the way that I learned how to write in English class was you have your introduction, and that's like an inverted triangle, right? So like the point of the triangle is your topic sentence. That's your main point, the thing you're trying to prove. And all of the sentences in your introduction that come before that sentence are sort of letting people know why they should care. So maybe you're writing about the reason why you chose to quit alcohol. And your topic is, your argument is that quitting alcohol is going to change your life for the better. So maybe your introduction would be, why do you drink alcohol in the first place? What's its purpose? Does it really do for you what you want it to, or is it masking something? Is it hiding the real problem from you? So you want to sort of use those first few sentences to lead into your main point from the broad generality of, okay, you could be writing about anything ever. So your first sentence, you want to catch attention, but then you want to draw their attention into the topic you're really focusing on. And then you have a bunch of like body paragraphs of main paragraphs, and each one of those has a topic sentence, some supporting arguments, and a concluding sentence. So it's like a mini version. But each one is proving the point somehow. It's like a piece of your main point. And the typical example would be like a 5-paragraph essay would have 3 of these main points. And then your conclusion, the first sentence of your conclusion is a reframing of the last sentence of your introduction. And that's the top of another triangle. And you're moving from, okay, I just proved my point. Now here's how you can use that information yourself, or here's how it applies to you. So it's the same as the story star, because your introductory paragraph is that inciting incident. It's a thing that happens. And your last sentence is that complication. And that complication leads into the next paragraphs, which are like unpacking the crisis. And then your first sentence of your conclusion is the climax. It's the, okay, you've made your choice, and this is what your choice is. And it ties back to the inciting incident. And then the resolution is the rest of your conclusion, where you're sort of making sure that all of the unanswered questions are tied up and make sense in the context of that choice that you made. Does that make sense?
It's a little too much for me.
That's okay. It's a lot easier if I have the thing to show you, but it's hiding somewhere.
And not offline, I'm sure we can do that, and I'll reach out to you very definitely for that. I was interested, does that eventually become second nature to you, or do you finish writing and then cross-check back to see you have the structure in place?
So I had I figured out this whole Story Star thing like last March. And before that, I had sort of the general idea of the fact funnel, but it was very intellectual. And it was something I learned in high school English, and it was a horrible, painful thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had an English essay assignment. It would take me 30 hours to write a 4-page double space, maybe at most 1,000 words. And I was really lucky because my mom taught English.
Right.
So I had a personal coach next to me for those 30 hours it took me.
Right.
And I had to write essentially two papers, because it took me writing the first paper to figure out what I was really trying to say, and then I could write the second paper.
Mm.
So it's something that you have to start by checking, and then over time it becomes something you can do as you go, because you know the structure very well.
Yeah. You learn it.
Yeah. So everything I wrote took me forever and was agonizing when I was in high school. I went to college and I had a required English class.
Mm.
And it took me 4 hours to write the same length paper. And like my grade was almost 100%. And I noticed it because it was an abrupt transition for me. But I think for a lot of people, it's not that clear cut. So it's yeah, you have to do it, and then it sort of internalizes over time.
What's striking for me in this conversation we're having is, if you take the poker industry, for example, there are many ways that you could become a better poker player. You can read books, you can watch online training videos, you can play more poker, you can talk to people in forums. But the very best way that you could be a great poker player is find a wonderful poker player and a wonderful coach and get them to teach you one-on-one. And that's the same in the sobriety industry as well, I believe. Is like, get somebody who really understands you and your situation, your predicament, and can empathize with you and work with you. And it seems to me the same in someone who really does understand. And I guess in writing, you've got to gel as well, right? I mean, I can imagine.
Yeah, you have to get along. I've tried to work with people that it seemed like we should get along, and then we didn't, and we parted ways at the end of the project because we just
When you say
about stuff.
When you say get along, do you mean like get along like personality wise, or get along in terms of how you write?
I think in terms of expectations and communication. I think because, I was learning how to write from my mom when I was a teenager. That was, we spent 30 hours of like her asking me questions and me being like, you're horrible.
Yeah.
But she and I, because she's my mom, we can communicate very well.
Right.
So I never misunderstood her communication, or if I did, I never had any problem being like, you don't make any sense. What? So I think if you know what to expect from each other and you can communicate clearly, okay, this sentence is working, but it feels a little bit weird to me and I'm not sure why. Because sometimes sentences are like that. Or this paragraph doesn't make any sense to me at all. I have no idea what you're trying to say. We need to have a conversation about it so that I can figure out how to help you. Right. So I've helped a lot of engineers write technical stuff because I'm an engineer by training, and engineers seem to have this aversion to understanding how to write. But they can communicate what they're trying to say when they're talking very easily. And then somehow they try and put it on paper and they try and make it sound all academic. And it turns into nonsense.
Right.
So I think you need someone who's willing to spend a pre-agreed upon amount of time reading on their own what you've given them, and then is willing to have a meeting with you either in person or over the internet where you can have a conversation about what their feedback was. So that if you have questions about why they said this or why they changed this sentence this way or why they were confused about something, you can talk about it and figure out, and that'll help you learn how to communicate more clearly in your writing.
I like it. Want to be my coach?
We can talk about that.
Have you got any addictions you need help with?
Not that I know about.
Well, let's find one quick so we can trade. My wife's a massage therapist and a health and nutritional coach and stuff like that, and she's always able to trade. You know, it's like, I'll give you a massage and you can review my book and this kind of stuff. Like, you know, it's real cool. You know, so I need to develop something like that. But no, I think, yeah, I mean, just to go back through all the things you've been helping me with there. I think away from the call and things that I need to get my head around more is playing around with Scrivener a little bit and use that compiling function. I've never used that before. So I'll go and do that. I would like to learn more off the call in something I can read and digest in my own time about story format and
that's coming soon. It's on my to-do list. I gave a 20-minute talk at a library last April about the format. And I recorded myself during one of my rehearsals for it, but it's just audio. There's no visuals. So I'm working on putting together some visuals to go along with it to make it more understandable. So that'll be up on the site pretty soon.
I'm interested to understand it more, and then kind of like a glove, like put my writing over it to actually see how far up my untrained mind is, because even though I'm not a trained writer, I'm a consumer of media, so I understand story.
Well, story is a human thing that we have developed as we've evolved. You know, like a fantastic example of a really well done story would be something like the Iliad or the Odyssey, or even fairy tales and folk tales. They all follow this structure. So we all have this intuitive understanding of what it is, which is why I like the Story Star, because it gives you a visual way of thinking about, how does this movie that I just watched fit, and how does this scene fit? Like, it's not one Story Star for one book. It's a Story Star for your article, but then each paragraph in your article has its own Story Star. So it's nesting like that.
I'm gonna have a look at that. I'm going to speak to you, of course, but at some point I think I need somebody to look over my writing and say, hey, you know, you're on the right track here, or you're way off, or let's have a look at this, or you could do this a little bit better. And definitely some help with getting a book from a kind of me just writing it to it going out. One more question. I have one more question before I let you go. Metaphors. So I read some wonderful fiction. I never used to read fiction. I said to myself, I'm not going to read fiction. Why am I going to read fiction? I'm never going to learn anything. I'm just going to read nonfiction books all the time. And I'm a voracious reader of nonfiction books. Then I think it was James Altucher. I was listening to his podcast one day, and James Altucher said, if you want to improve your writing, then read. So and he said, read fiction. So I started to read fiction just before I wrote. And I would and as I'm reading my Kindle, so at the moment I'm reading Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. As I'm going through it, I will note down wonderful metaphors or points of phrases or words that I like the sound of that I never use in my vocabulary, and I'll note them down. And then as I write an article, I try to fit them in, which is some sort of plagiarism, I guess, but whatever. I know that reading Stephen Pressfield's The Authentic Swing, that's kind of how he works as well anyway.
Yeah, that's how all artists work.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
Although I do it more intuitively than you. I don't always take notes.
No,
I'm reading fiction, but I've been reading fiction since I could read.
I can write a poker article and you'll know what kind of fiction book I'm reading. You'll be like, why is this poker article about Greek war? You know?
But that's actually a really good technique to use because you're helping your readers understand what you're saying faster. Because they have had some level of exposure to the mythology in school. If they're in the West, which I'm assuming your readers are primarily in the UK, right?
Yeah, UK and America, yeah.
Yeah. So they've had at least a base level introduction to most Greek mythology. And so they'll get those analogies, especially if, you know, they're guys who like to watch things like Gladiator and Spartacus and stuff.
I read people like Pressfield. What else did I read just recently? Why Sammy Runs, I think it was called, or something. And they have wonderful metaphors.
Yeah.
And I'm very envious. Like, all my metaphors are very smutty, are very, I don't know, dirty schoolboy, childish metaphors. And they have these wonderful, beautiful metaphors. And I guess my question is, what tips are there for learning great metaphors? Is there a book out there, the book of wonderful metaphors? Is it just reading and learning and then creating your own?
I think the best way is to read a lot of classic literature, first of all. People like Alexander Dumas and Shakespeare and Jane Austen, a lot of the classics.
Right.
Because that gives you a different perspective on metaphor because they're writing at a different time from a different perspective. So what they will notice and what they'll use in their writing is going to be different from what we notice today. Right. But then the other side of it is to pay attention as you're going about doing ordinary things and to notice things that strike you as interesting, to notice the connections. Okay, maybe you see a billboard ad for headphones and it's got this big parrot on it.
Yeah.
And then you're reading a book and there's a parrot who's on the shoulder of a pirate. And somehow you like realize something about talking parrots and, you know, they say whatever they've been trained to say and it's often like random and inappropriate. And then you think about, okay, how can we learn how to use that constructively instead of destructively or something like that. And
I do that, yeah.
Yeah.
I constantly walk around with my note app on my phone and I'll be having a conversation with my friend or something and I'll stop and they'll be like, oh my God, that's going in the story, isn't it? Like, yeah.
Well, and it's I do this too. It's like random things. Like I was in Texas for a couple days and I was driving with my friend on the highway and there was this sign for a city called Pharr, but it was spelled Pharr.
Right.
And I was like, Pharr. And I spent 10 minutes giggling about it. And that made it into I have a list of random ideas on my Evernote. And then I was having a conversation that was completely normal. Like, I don't even remember what we were talking about. And I said the phrase, a dying machine, which made sense in the context, but then I couldn't continue with the conversation because I realized that a dying machine could be a machine that's like falling apart, or it could be a machine that makes people die or helps people die, or it could be like Yeah, and anyway, so I like started giggling about that too because it was like a pun, but it wasn't a pun on purpose.
Basically saying all us writers are space cadets.
Yeah, well, there's a really interesting article I read somewhere, and I don't have the link for it anymore, which is really unfortunate. But there was a psychology study that this paper was talking about that they did like a neuroscience brain scan thing of a bunch of schizophrenics and a bunch of creative people like artists, writers.
Yeah.
And apparently creative people use like almost the same parts of their brain as schizophrenics do.
Right.
So we think we're crazy, and we are a little bit, but we're not actually crazy. We just know how to access that part of our brains that other people
we think
can't.
we're crazy. We're crazy, we are. Yeah, that's been really wonderful. I'm definitely gonna check out. Was it scriberfile.com?
Yeah.
I'll check that out as well.
I haven't been super active on there because I have a ton of things to do, but it's one of the things I found.
So active.
Decided. It's one of the things I found when I first decided I was gonna write for other people and not just for myself. So it was a good discovery, and it's a really useful thing. There's a lot of people who are helpful on there, and they've got a lot of articles that you can probably read and learn from, and
I will.
Forums to ask people questions about everything. So,
well, Ariana, it's been wonderful talking to you. I've got to go because you said about reading classics, and I pulled my nose up a little bit because I don't like reading classics, but
I'll give you some recommendations of ones that are actually fun to read.
That'd be good. I did start reading Virginia Woolf the other day. I read Death of a Moth and a few other things, and I really liked it. But I'm going to watch the Moby Dick movie tonight. So
okay, movies are good too, especially yes. The long versions that the BBC does as miniseries. So they have a couple really good renditions of Jane Austen novels that are miniseries. So it's like a 5-hour commitment if you do it all at once, but you can watch 1 hour at a time over the course of a week. Mm-hmm. And it's completely accurate to the story. Unlike a lot of the books that get made into movies that, you know, they try and fit the whole, 500,000 words
into movie I'm going to watch tonight.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't read Dickens. I can't do it. And I tried to read Moby Dick and I couldn't read that either. But when I see theatrical productions of Dickens novels, it's great. I can watch A Christmas Carol. I can watch Nicholas Nickleby, but I can't read it. Right. So movies are just as good as books for learning how story works.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
awesome. Thank you for your time, your education, your knowledge.
Yeah.